Hi, everyone. Hello from Singapore. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for today's event on understanding water technology innovations for smart cities, organized by SGInnovate and Polish Investment and Trade Agency. My name is Jody from SGInnovate, and for those of you who may be more new to us, we are a global investment company set up as a private entity and funded by the Singapore government with the mission to build deep tech innovations from Singapore for the world. We do so by investing in and helping to build deep tech startups in the various fields of AI, medtech, quantum tech, and increasingly we're also starting to look into newer areas such as urban solutions and sustainability, advanced manufacturing, and food and agri-tech. We also work closely with entrepreneurial scientists and clinicians to help to build their innovative research from lab to market and also help to develop deep tech talent as well as engage with a vibrant deep tech ecosystem. Part of our initiatives to strengthen the community and ecosystem and generate knowledge sharing is through community events such as the one we have today. In view of Singapore's Green Plan 2030, which is a national sustainability movement which seeks to rally bold and collective action to tackle climate change, today's webinar is timely as well to share and open the discussion on water technology innovations in smart cities as we try to find the newest technologies that help sustainability. And we truly hope that you enjoy today's session. Without further ado, I'll now like to pass the time over to our good friend and moderator for today, Magdalena, who is the head of the Singapore Trade Office from the Polish Investment and Trade Agency, for her opening remarks before the panel discussion. Magdalena, please. Sorry, Magda, I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thanks so much. It's my great pleasure to welcome all our wonderful panelists and audience from Singapore and Poland at our panel discussion on water technologies and how they can support sustainable goals for smart cities. My name is Magdalena and I manage Singapore Trade Office of Polish Investment and Trade Agency, which is a governmental agency supporting Polish entrepreneurs in their business journey in Singapore. I'm also engaged with Central Eastern Chamber of Commerce, holding the role of Vice President. I'm more than pleased to moderate today's discussion with such great experts from the water industry that decided to join us and share their experience on deep tech technologies and cross-sectoral collaborations in water management. But before we deep dive into discussion, I would like to start with a round of introductions. Our panelists have very impressive experience in water treatment technologies and innovative solutions for sustainable water management, some with very significant contributions in their respective fields, and others with several years of experience with MNCs. Let's start. Katrin, would you like to give us a short introduction, please?
Okay, thanks, Magda. So I'm Catherine. I'm the Associate Director of Report to Wave Incubator. My organization is a joint venture between VFT Ventures and Emerald Technology Ventures, a local VC firm here in Singapore and one overseas based in Switzerland. We are supported by Enterprise SG and Public Utilities Board. The main objective of our incubator is to create an ecosystem for emerging water technology startups. We are probably the only one incubator here in Singapore that focuses on helping very early stage water companies. So for myself, I'm actually an engineer by training. I obtained my PhD from National University of Singapore. So after I graduated, I worked in both local and international companies to gain technical and commercial experiences. Now I use my experience to guide the early startups in terms of product definition and design, early customer identification and support, market assessment, and financial analysis and planning. I'm very happy to be here with you to share our experience in water industry. Thanks.
Thanks, Katrin. It's very impressive. Victor, over to you.
Hi, my name is Victor, and I'm actually working in Sabana Jurong. I'm the head of resiliency there. So maybe I just give a brief introduction of Sabana Jurong Group. Sabana Jurong Group is actually a global urban infrastructure and managed services consulting firm with over 70 years of track record, and it's headquartered in Singapore. It has actually more than 120 offices in 40 countries, and basically we do have architects, designers, planners, engineers, and other specialists, including myself, which I'm actually a water treatment person. We actually cover the entire project lifecycle from planning and design through to delivery and management. And we do provide a full suite of multidisciplinary consulting services across various range of sectors that not just includes water, but it also includes aviation, healthcare, hospitality, transport, and the environment, as well as energy and resources. Personally, myself, I'm actually looking at water sector per se, and I'm actually the principal investigator of 2 R&D projects worth multi-million. And I look at digitalisation, artificial intelligence, as well as stormwater management. And it's my pleasure to be here to share some of the work that we have done over in Sabana Jurong Group. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing, Victor. We are very delighted to have you. Evelyn, please tell us a little bit more about your company and yourself.
Thanks, Magda, and thank you to Jody for doing the opening. Hi, everybody, no matter which time zone you are in, either good morning or good afternoon. So I'm Evelyn. I'm from SGInnovate Private Limited, and it's my own company. Same as Catherine, I'm an engineer by training. I graduated from NUS in Singapore, and I started my career in process and project work, and then venturing out to business development because I realized that I like to engage with people. I like to talk. So then after that, I worked for a local company for about 10 years doing business development work, not only in Singapore, but in the region in Southeast Asia. So SGInnovate was started by me in 2017, and we are still in the water industry. We do water, wastewater treatment, desalination. Basically, we work with manufacturers and technology providers to promote and implement their technologies and products in Singapore for the water market. So our main client will be the main contractors and PUB. So nice to meet everyone. I hope we have a good discussion today.
Thank you so much. Michal, please share with us about yourself.
Thank you, Magda. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our interesting discussion. So my name is Michal Wojewski. I'm head of international development in Vares. Vares is a company based out from Poland. So we're opening currently office in Singapore. We're focusing, well, basically we are an IoT, NB-IoT 5G lab with the focus of providing this 5G technology into utilities and especially water industry. So basically, we come from Poland. The majority of the businesses we're doing is based in Poland. However, recently we also are setting up some partnership in POC in Thailand, in Malaysia, and hopefully very soon in Singapore. Me, myself, prior joining Vares, I was working 12 years in management consulting in Accenture and in Kearney, both in office in Warsaw, in Poland, and in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wojtek? Well, you are on mute, Wojtek.
Okay, I had to unmute me. Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and let me introduce myself. I'm Wojtek. My name is, I'm representing Symbiona, which is a Polish and also European contractor and technology provider in water reuse systems delivery, as well as bioenergy, I mean the waste to biogas solutions. We are quite intensively entering Asian markets, so I hope that my presence will give some opportunity to give some annotations about the entering with innovations on the market. Personally, I'm the absolvent of Brookes University in the United Kingdom, also holds MSc in the management from a Polish university. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the sharings and for the introductions. I'm really looking forward to our interesting discussion. While I was doing a little research for today, a couple of few facts I thought were pretty telling, such as that nearly half the global population are already living in a potential water scarce areas at least 1 month per year, and this could increase to some even 5 to 6 billion in 2050. What I found interesting is that about 70% of the affected people actually live in Asia. the number can actually grow and be 69% by 2050. Moreover, 700 million people worldwide could be displaced by intense water scarcity by 2030, which is pretty scaring. And that my first question is for all of the panelists. So I'm going to give you all a chance to jump in. And that is, what are the main challenges in the water management that you would name as the priority areas that need to be addressed? So let's start with Victor, since you work for the company that implements projects worldwide. I'm sure you have a bird's eye view perspective. We would be very happy to hear your opinion about that.
Thank you, Magdalene. So I think a lot of the experiences that Sabana Jurong Group has is comes from its master planning capabilities. And in fact, usually before any development of any area, it's very prudent to need to actually plan the area site properly, not in terms of just the essential services that needs to be up, but also the requirements of a sustainable kind of a business model. And I mean, in any land development, there needs to be economic activities. And economic activities, as we all know, definitely need power as well as water. And water is always an issue that needs to be resolved. So a lot of times, there's a need to do proper planning. And how to do this proper plan, beside the fact that you gauge from what is your so-called industrial areas that you need to serve, but also potentially the residential requirements. And you do need to calculate the water requirements. And this thing usually, if you don't have a ready source of water, that can be an issue. And a lot of times we do plan for, the rainfall patterns, and with the erratic so-called climate weather, this kind of thing. If you don't do this well, you may run out of water over time, because there's a cost associated with it. Because do you actually leave more land out to actually store more water, or do you actually in a way play around with nature to try and see if you can let your water sustain longer? So these things are very important, and that's where modeling comes into play, which is why also I went into stormwater management, because when you have all this modeling and you can actually simulate out what is the requirement that you need, compared to the previous times where if there's a manual calculation, and you can take even into account climate change conditions projections to do this planning. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the planning that you've mentioned is probably plays the most crucial role as well in the entire process. And Katrin, what do you think about that?
I think everybody probably know the problem statement that Magda just mentioned. We are lack of water. It has been in the spotlight for many years, right? So I think planning is a very important factor of water management. Certainly that in terms of developing countries, the planning is still on the way. But I would also want to bring your attention to another set of problem, whereby you in those developed countries, we do have aging infrastructure, right? So a lot of times you see pipe leaking from wastewater or water. This actually create a lot of problems. You can imagine that in clean water, our water treatment plant actually pump out more water than what is consumed by the population. And in terms of water treatment plant, we end up retreating more water than customers give to them. Okay, so this creates serious profit loss for the water and wastewater treatment plants. Also, it creates a very negative social impact. I think to solve this problem, not only significant funds need to be pumped into restoration of the infrastructure, but also require a good monitoring and prediction system for the possible leakages. So that's where this IoT and modeling all come into places. And other than the infrastructure, in terms of the treatment side, I think another big problem is water pollution. So it's actually created by human activities. Many developing countries tend to use those like very heavily polluted industry to promote economic growth. That is often the cases that you see in Singapore, in Asia, not in Singapore. Okay, so to solve this issue, we actually need both regulation and enforcement. Very often what you see in Asian countries is that we keep improving the standard, the regulation, but actually there's no enforcement. Okay, so sometimes in contrast to this good intention, implementing a higher regulation doesn't really give you a very positive feedback. So enforcement and regulation have to come hand in hand when it comes to solve the water management issue. And also, not to mention, climate change is also making things worse, right? I guess everybody has heard a lot about it, like sea level rise, flooding, and things like that. I think it's a complicated issue, but I'm very happy to see that more collective efforts from different entities, and also there's an increasing emphasis on carbon neutrality in recent years.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think this collaboration is something could be a great platform, you know, to develop some solutions. Having said that, and you've mentioned and highlighted as well this management leakages, which is also an expertise of Michal. Michal, what kind of challenges do you see around the topic, and is there any other area that you would like to highlight as well here?
Correct. The leakages of the system of the water distribution network is very, very significant. We actually, when I was joining Varus, I know there's a problem, but I was not expecting the problem is so big. So, I mean, we as a Varus, we're currently conducting several POC and test implementations in different parts of the world. And the data are really, really, really big, right? So for instance, one of our partners in APEC countries claimed he's losing between 80 to 25% of the water, right? So they're pumping the water in the system, but they bring up to 24% less into the customer. Another example for our customers based in Poland, which is a small rural, say the water distributor from the rural areas, they're saying that they're losing 40% of the water is either through the leakages or unauthorized usage. In Singapore, I came across some data to conduct research by POB, claiming that 10% of the household that was taking part in this trial, which was almost 100 households, identified the leakage of the water. So I think the problem is very, very important, significant. We in Varus estimate that if we are able to really provide an efficient system that will eliminate 75% of the leakages, we are able to reduce the water price for the final customers by 10 to 20% without even touching the margin of the water distribution network. So I think the problem is huge. It's definitely an issue has cut across different countries around the world, and this needs to be addressed very, very soon.
Okay, thank you. That's a very good point. And Wojtek, from your side, you know, the pollution that was mentioned before is also something, you know, your expertise when it comes to Symbiona activities. Could you share the challenges that you think that are the priority areas?
Yes, I would say that there are different platforms of the challenges which are connected to the water management. The first of all, we have all these already mentioned political challenges and also the political obstacles all over the world, including the bureaucracy influence for water management, which is slowing down planning, for instance. On the other hand, there are typically technical challenges, depending on the countries and the regions. And some of them are connected to the already polluted primary streams, which are really, really tough challenge for the processed water or drinking water providers or suppliers in Southeast Asia, in some countries of Southeast Asia, where the streams are heavily polluted by industry, for instance, from the palm oil industry. On the other hand, even in Europe, we do have problems with so-called polluted surface water or drainwater or groundwater streams, which might be polluted with the old industrial facilities, or also some so-called BNRs as well, which is a big problem, or which is becoming a big problem in Poland, that sources of the agriculture are being drained to the groundwater this problem is becoming quite real. On the other hand, there is also quite economical challenge connected, how to implement effective and also economical technologies, especially for growing countries, for the developing countries, which are needed not only fantastic innovations, but are also in need of something which is creating some, let's say, ROI for them, as those countries are quite limited with the investment, and not always it's possible to get the, I don't know, financing from the World Bank or cheap financing from G2G, which is a little bit stopped at that moment, especially after pandemic or during pandemic. So all those challenges are influencing each other and are creating some kind of patterns we have to take into account while we all saying that there is a challenge in water management. It cannot be simply said that there is only one factor.
Sure, definitely. I think it's like, it's as you all said before, it's like the combination of different factors. And what's interesting as well, when you think about the climate change itself, right? And we're thinking and asking ourselves, what might be the effective and price-wise innovative solutions and their implementations to the respective fields, to actually have the sustainability goals. The question is if it's not going to trigger again on the other side the climate change as well. If we have plants which are transforming as well, some waste, and how about that topic? Do you see a challenge here as well from that side?
I mean, from the economics point of view, yes, there is a huge challenge, especially in our experience in Southeast Asia. That many areas, even heavily populated, are will be having trouble if we use the European approach, a centralized approach for water treatment or wastewater treatment. And here, according to the water management, or any kind of technology supplier has to come with maybe something we may call the centralized treatment solution, which is able to serve not a capacity of millions of people, but maybe a capacity of the 15,000 people or 20,000 people or 50,000 people, which can be also coupled with some kind of local energy sources. And this is the challenge, how to plan, especially if we talk about the rural Indonesia, Celebes, or the other islands. If we talk about even Malaysia, even the Peninsular Malaysia, you have the villages which are not connected to the grid or rarely connected to the grid. Then building wastewater treatment plant or desalination plant, which is using quite intensive, quite high energy, which is having quite high energy consumption, is a challenge. Then, okay, one is possibility to cut the projects into smaller parts, or on the other hand, you might try to find some, let's say, innovations or innovative solutions for desalination, like forward osmosis or some, let's say, more science fiction technologies which are in a very early level of development, including nanotechnologies for desalination. But this kind of approach is creating some kind of, let's say, vision for next 10, 15, or 20 years where we can go. Of course, in Singapore, definitely are in a privileged approach as a relatively small country in a relatively small area. But then the challenge is becoming, if we are talking about some other remote location, and how to deliver fresh water. If you think how to deliver fresh water to, I don't know, to the Borneo side of Indonesia, where you are not having any kind of energy, or you are having just a polluted water, then it's becoming a challenge.
Oh, thank you for that. Evelyn, what are your thoughts on the topic? I know that you have experience with collaborations across Southeast Asia and also China market. How do you see these challenges?
Well, just to say a bit about Singapore first, because I grew up here. I was born here and grew up here. So since young, we have been very privileged in Singapore. We always have access to clean water. You turn on the taps and the water just flow out. But we have also been taught that we need to save water, reuse and recycle water. So to me, we mentioned about climate change and population growth. So the need for infrastructure is also increasing. And of course, the demand for water is also increasing. So how much can we tap from nature? How much rainwater can we tap, especially with climate change? Either you get periods of dry spell or you get very heavy thunderstorm. So I think we also mentioned about desalination, and in Singapore, we have something called new water, which is recycled water. And of course, we have our very basic one, which is tapping off from catchment areas, the reservoirs. But land scarcity is one thing. So I feel that Singapore, we will depend more, we will be more dependent on manufactured source of water, of new water and desalination. But that's what is mentioned. It is also energy intensive. So to me, one of the biggest challenge other than finding sources of water will be how to have enough energy, how to make it green and sustainable. And of course, the other part of it will be the smart technology part. So to me, sustainability and smart, these two are the issues that I see in water management. And as a private company, for me, right? So actually, basically, every day other than technology is all about sales. So coming back to the basic, when we have smart, when we have sustainability, what about costs? So cost balancing. So when Magda, you asked about what about Southeast Asia and China? I would say you have to exclude Singapore from this cost discussion, because in Singapore, I would say PUB will spare no cost to upgrade our infrastructure, and we are always trying new technologies in Singapore. But out of Singapore, a lot of countries, I myself have stayed in Vietnam for 5 years, and I see that how you cannot trust tap water. You cannot even trust the ice that you put into the water in restaurants. You know, everything have to come from the bottle, and you just cannot have cold drinks. So this is what I experienced in Vietnam in 5 years. So when you turn on the tap, the water, you are lucky that it is transparent. Transparent doesn't mean it's clean. Most of the time we get brownish, yellowish water. So in Asia, Southeast Asia, it might not be so easy to implement smart and sustainable. First, we have to think of basic water infrastructure.
Thank you for sharing that point. And yeah, that's actually the perfect segue to the next round of the questions about advanced technologies, deep tech technologies, which can enhance the sustainability goals. And what you've mentioned about Singapore, I'm pretty impressed, you know, like from the very beginning I arrived to Singapore, you know, it's that the city-state has proven that the limitation of natural resources can be a great stimulant to actually explore and introduce innovations that can boost this water resilience. And I think that systematic approach and involvement of key industry stakeholders paved the way for Singapore. You've mentioned PUB, for example, right? And currently, Singapore is considered a model city for water management. I think that, you know, the technologies which are being developed here, they might be replicable, and it's possible for the implementations as well across the region in the future as the best practices. And today we have Victor with us from Surbana Jurong, a Singapore-based consulting firm specializing in big infrastructural and urban development projects, and track record probably for more than over 30 countries. And Victor, could you please share with us Surbana Jurong's experiences and best practices of this kind of cross-sectoral collaborations that can be used as an advice for the policymakers in water governance?
Okay, I think it's quite interesting with the discussion from Evelyn that goes into the term called trust. So if you actually follow St. Gallen's symposium, or basically trust is a very big topic in today's times. It comes from the pandemic where, you know, news are being shared not, you know, correctly here and there. And even in the water itself, like just what Evelyn was just sharing, trust, that's the basic thing. And Singapore has a very good reputation whereby we trust our government quite well, and we trust them to do the right thing. So when it comes to large infrastructure works, there are economies of scales that can be reaped across when it comes to many things, because you're sharing the cost over many denominations, so it becomes very cost effective. But also what Michael was sharing, that back in Indonesia, where you have smaller areas, it may not be so conducive for large centralized systems, and you need to think of perhaps potentially decentralized systems as a way to go. But having said that, when it comes to large cities, for example, Jakarta, or even very densely populated cities in South Korea, this kind of thing, so then when you have these kind of systems that fit Singapore very well, it sort of makes sense because it will be very cost effective. So so in a way, what I'm trying to say is that you need to look at the situation before you apply a one-size-fits-all kind of solution. And cost is definitely a key thing, because in order for this kind of infrastructure to be sustainable, you need to calculate the cost. But when we are actually sharing such costs, a lot of policy makers, especially in developing countries, maybe they do not think that water as a way is a very holistic ecosystem. Meaning, in a sense, you don't just think of supplying water, because you need to think about how to treat the water. And not only these areas treating and supplying, each of them has their own collection system. So when you supply the pipe network, you get all these leakages. When you collect also, you get all these facts that, in a sense, that should you be mixing the waste to treat it, because the industrial waste and the municipal waste, they are very different to treat. So all these concepts needs to come in, and the cost actually covers this entire thing. And Singapore, we have a very simplified way. We pay one tariff, and that one tariff is quite high because it covers all these things. But when it comes to the developing countries, you don't have this kind of tariff. You only have the one where you pay the water to drink, or potentially to get from the tap. And it's a bit difficult to convince the community to start paying for the wastewater treatment, because it's a cycle. If you don't treat your wastewater well, it gets back to polluting your source of water. So the entire system, if I would take one step back, it's actually about trust. So somehow or another, when we actually talk to the government officials, we need to actually advise them to start thinking from the start, and how to actually do the right thing first, and then slowly, step by step, to actually move towards getting the entire ecosystem up. That itself will take some time, because Asia is very complicated, because we do have quite many cultures to think of. Yeah, I don't have an answer for you, but I'm just telling you how complicated the problem can be. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess exactly as you said, like there are different layers, right? And this systematic approach and going slowly, one by one, it's something that has to be done properly, and more understanding and the trust plays this is the foundation, right, for the change.
Yes.
So definitely that's very important. Katrin, I would like to ask a question to
Maybe
you.
before I end off, just now earlier, Katrin was also
Yes.
sharing trust itself is about transparency. It's not just more regulations also. The enforcement needs to come hand in hand. So we do know in our Singaporean culture is that when the government says must do this, you are very sure that it will be doing this, because if you don't do this, something else will happen. So as the trust is indeed one of the underlying factors, personally. Thanks.
Thank you, Victor, so much. Indeed. Katrin, on daily basis, you work with various water tech innovators. Could you tell us a bit more, how important is the role of startups, of young entrepreneurs in shaping sustainable water ecosystems? And maybe you could also tell us some examples of breakthrough projects developed under the wings of Ripple to Wave that could be significant when it comes to the global race of water resilience.
Okay, thank you. So in my opinion, right, startups are actually the propeller for technology advancement. It might sound a little bit like a brag, but this is actually my observation from my experience working in government agencies, global water companies, as well as this startup community. I think part of the reason is because entrepreneurs can actually they actually take a lot of pride in the companies that they build from the scratch, right? So they tend to push harder for the companies to grow and for the end users to adopt the technology. I think the other part of the problem, the issue might be because water is so essential, everybody has to rely on safe water, on a safe drinking water. So when it comes to end users, like those like big utility companies, they tend to be very cautious because their primary responsibility is to provide a clean water or clean up the used water for everyone. So in this sense, I would say that startups actually inject the competition and also the innovation into the market to push our technology to go forward. Okay, so a few examples from my experience from the companies that I work with. We have a few incubators that focuses on rapid bacterial detection in water and wastewater. I guess everybody must have heard about how people actually sample the wastewater and detect COVID virus in the wastewater. This is actually a way to identify COVID-19 infections in the community. So our companies are actually focusing on this kind of rapid testing. Instead of like you spend one day in the lab to do all this testing, you can actually get a result on the site in about 2 hours. And some other breakthroughs can really change our century-old wastewater treatment system. Is like advancement in material science, things like nanofiltration. They can actually bring a lot of revolutionary change to the industry. And of course, not to forget, another very big part of the innovation is definitely digitalization, right? Everybody is talking about that. I think during this pandemic period, we actually see the importance of this digitalization because everybody has to work from home. So if you don't really have this remote control IoT system, you can't really operate the system, right? So digitalization is also a very, very important topic that our staffs are addressing. And I believe these are things that we can apply locally and also internationally.
How do you think that how the ecosystem players can collaborate more effectively? You know, when we think about the local community as well with the international players, what would be the main factor? You know, especially maybe nowadays when we work online mainly.
Yeah. So to be very frank, right, I'll just tell you that in terms of environmental sector, the most important factor is actually government regulations, okay, the enforcement. So first of all, I think the government regulations and enforcement have to be here for the whole industry to collaborate. Because I have heard people talking about pollution just now. I think the reason why we don't have, you know, not everybody is addressing the problem is because we simply have a very cheap alternative to our wastewater. You don't have to treat it. You can just dump it into the river. Nobody is going to catch you. Okay, so this explains a gap between enforcement and regulation, or even I would say the lack of regulation in a country. So this is the most important ecosystem player in terms of our water industry. Other than that, we see infrastructure builders and asset management companies, right? Like what Victor is saying. I think such infrastructure builders as well as end users tend to be a little bit cautious. The reason I already explained is because the biggest responsibility is to provide a safe drinking water to everybody. So I would say that for these kind of players, they have to be open-minded to adopt early technology like what our startups are offering. It's not an easy step, but I see many big organizations actually open up to you know, technology providers like startups. Okay, so I think other than this, startups have to actually work hand in hand, collaborate with each other. I think in water industry, it's traditional for us to, as in for technology providers to work hand in hand, because nobody can actually provide a solution to address every problem that our end users have. So collaboration from startups is also the key in our ecosystem.
Thank you, thank you. I do believe that the collaboration is the key here, right? Especially that we are tackling such an important topic and multi-layered. And Michal, I would like to ask you, Vares focuses on improving water efficiency by combining data analytics and IoT in your solution, which is smart water meters. What do you think is the scale of the problem, and how much water do we lose from leakages? What would you say on that?
Well, I think Magda, I already mentioned about the amount of water we're losing.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
I will a little bit tell more about what has been already told, but emphasizing importance for the water industry in adoption of the new technologies, right? So we see this from the other aspects of our business, how the technology is shaping our life. But if you really look into, for instance, this water meters that we have installed on a home, it's still very analogy, old meter that most of the time, every month or 3 months, somebody is coming to, to read the digits on this meter. So I think the water industry, in my opinion, in many aspects, still have a lot of space to be more open and more adaptive to the technology that is shaping. And this is when the collaborations come in place. Collaboration within the startups in the ecosystem of water industry is one thing. But the second, we really have to look into new opportunities, new businesses. The smart metering, 5G is a new example. But very soon in the water industry, we'll have new players like telecom providers, system integrator businesses who will be providing the system for the people to have like on mobile phones monitoring of the data of the water users in their homes. We will have a completely new players coming from the cloud industry who will be able to really install numbers of sensors across the distribution network, collect data, analyze the data, and present data. What I'm trying to say that apart from the challenges that we mentioned already for the water industry, which is scarcity of water, which is the aging infrastructure, which is a different approach to different parts of the world developed versus not developed, I think very important is also to open this industry to be more adapted to the technology, thinking even more out of the box, and be open to the new technologies that would definitely change the way we see water industry so far.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you think about this data collection? I know that the smart water meters, they have this option for the real data monitoring, right? Which is very fascinating. And I know that you can really prevent the leakages, and they can tell, what is the amount of the water waste in that sense. And I know you have some implementations in Poland in that field. Are there any takeaways about this data collection, consumer behaviors maybe that you would like to share?
First of all, we have to understand what does it mean the real-time data collection, right? So I mean, currently, what we do, we just collect data once a month in Singapore, in Poland once every three months. So, I mean, we're very reactive to the problem, right? We cannot address the problem on spot. And now try to imagine a new world where we have like remote reading, and every single second we can basically see the results of the water flow in this particular place. It's not only about the water quantity, but also the water quality, about the pressure and around everything. It's opening us completely to the completely new set of possibilities, right? Okay, some people saying we do already have this remote reading installed in some places. I'm saying, yes, right, but this is just one street, maybe one district. But what if we have whole country, whole cities being connected with this remote ability to read? This opens up to completely new life. And I think we don't even see the number of changes that might be imposed once we are really able to get the real-time data. And look, I mean, we now can see where each of us is located by having a mobile phone, geolocalization. We can see where our car is located. We can set up the temperature in our cars by sitting at home. I mean, and the water industry, reading the water meters, it's still so let's say Asian, I would even say sometimes. So I think the smart metering, the technology well adopted in the water industry definitely reshape the way we think in the water distribution, about the water distribution.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm actually curious why it's like that this technology, is still not implemented widely, right? In that sense, right?
It's interesting. It's a fair question, Magda. I think it's mostly because the 5G network, it's a real enabler of IoT, of smart cities, and of this kind of ability to have reach from many devices. The little bit maybe off topic is not the water industry, it's more telecommunication industry, but the main difference between 4G and 5G is that the 5G infrastructure is able to handle more than 1,000 more devices. So basically try to imagine each of us have a mobile phone and it works well in 4G, but in 5G, apart from this mobile phone, we can have 1,000 devices connected around us to the internet. Right, so I think this is the main reason why on the large national scale, the 5G, the smart metering was hardly in few countries ever developed, right? So I think this is the reason why the availability of 5G will definitely open us to the smart metering.
Thank you for that, Michal. Let's move forward to Wojtek and some solutions for water recycling, which are dedicated to water infrastructure owners, I believe, and municipalities and their respective agencies. Wojtek, what is the public stakeholders' approach towards investments in innovative solutions, and does sustainability always come with a higher cost for the end users?
It's a complicated question, I'd say, but it depends on the needs, especially. It depends on the needs, because if we take a look on the Singapore, the water reuse is becoming, new water is becoming some kind of standard. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody treats it as something special. In Europe, we are having quite a different approach, which is also connected with the legal framework. As water used for drinking is not legally approved in many European countries, or it's quite difficult to use it. However, these kind of issues are becoming more and more important for the European, let's say, municipalities, because the companies are using them because the companies see instant ROI in this kind of water recovery solutions. For the water management, the water companies, municipal water companies or wastewater treatment companies, especially are looking for a kind of some middle way solutions in many cases. So in many European countries, the water is used for irrigations, and then we cannot say it's more expensive. If we take a look on the new solutions, let's say so-called new solutions, so membrane bioreactors, which are quite common in many countries at that moment. The water is so clean, you can reuse it for irrigation easily. You can reuse it also this kind of water after MBRs for many industrial processes or for car washing or the other cases. If you use the mentioned nanofiltration or reverse osmosis system, then you can easily prepare drinking water from that. And there is not such additional cost. The main case here is how to balance the energy consumption. There is also, I'm referring to the one questions which are already sent by our attendees. And the main problem with this kind of solution is not the investment, because the innovations are getting cheaper and cheaper. And in many cases, especially in Poland, where the construction costs are becoming extremely high, the innovations are one of the keys for the market development. So what we are doing in the Central Europe at that moment, especially because of the COVID as well, the clients or municipalities are willing to have the projects delivered quickly and running SAP, I would say, then you must deliver some kind of innovation. And it might be a kind of process innovation, as mentioned, membrane bioreactor. It can be a package system delivered quickly in also using a small area only for a building. You may also deliver quite complicated system or a system who will be building this kind of water use innovation. So aiming to recover as much water as possible for some kind of needs. And our experience actually is that many municipalities in Poland are asking for the opportunity to recover water, as I mentioned, for irrigation, but also for some other purposes. Whereas also the Polish government is also currently doing some kind of pilot program for the municipalities and industry to be involved in this kind of water recovery systems. On the other hand, all of this investment and this payoff is connected with the energy consumption, energy recovery, as energy in Poland, which is a coal-binded economy, I would say like this. Energy cost is becoming a significant factor in many ways of the technology choice, I would say, the factor for technology choice. So, for instance, our experience is that our clients are asking for something more. And the recent experience is that, for instance, tomorrow we are opening some municipal wastewater treatment plants, backed up by so-called artificial intelligence, who is monitoring. We developed the system which is monitoring because of the sensors, some kind of rate of like ammonia, nitrates, CODs, or the carbon source, and the other things, in order to, first of all, to give some kind of artificial expertise, I would call it like this, to the operator, who might be not skilled operator, but on the other hand, to decrease energy consumption, because then we are capable to automatically lower the exploitation cost either by less pumping or more efficient pumping, less recirculation between the chambers, less use of the mixers, and less use of the blowers as well. Then classical membrane bioreactor plant, which is considered quite expensive in the running, is becoming much more cheaper in operation than the classical activated sludge, which is not giving any kind of benefits to the customer at that moment. So this is one of the points. And secondly, this kind of innovations can be also connected with the biogas generation, so the resource or the resource recovery. But there is a longer discussion. I don't think we have a time at that moment.
Yeah, I know it's an interesting topic.
Especially for sludge treatment, Singapore is quite experienced with the thermolysis, and there was a lot of testing by PUB about that matter. But in Poland, it's also increasing. This kind of technologies are increasing.
Thank you, Wojtek. I also know that you are working closely with SGInnovate, with Evelyn. And Evelyn, what would you say, when it comes to, because Wojtek mentioned several different technologies that can basically be implemented in the water treatment, and what's the approach when it comes to sourcing for technologies, and what would you say about like the synergy effects of the collaborations itself?
Yeah, okay. So coming from the private company side, I would say that before I look for any partners or any technology, first is the market overview, So in Singapore, what is the market needs of Singapore? As we keep on saying that we have a very, very limited land. So everything that we put in must be, first of all, have a small footprint. That is why we started from activated sludge, and now we are also going into membrane bioreactor. And we are skipping steps along the way. We are putting things into more compact configuration. So other than the first small footprint, second thing, of course, is the big topic of energy. How to be more energy efficient. If in any treatment plant, I would say maybe desalination plant, 60, 70, up to maybe 80% of the operational cost is due to electricity. It's not so much about chemicals and not so much about labor. Of course, minus COVID aside, COVID causes a lot of labor issue, but we should take COVID out of the context. In normal times, it's usually power that consumes the most in terms of OPEX costs. So I will look for something that is more energy efficient. And the quest for lower energy consumption per meter cube of water is an ongoing thing, and I must say that in Singapore projects, we are controlling the energy consumption pretty low. We we don't have the luxury, you know, of blowing the air blowers, of operating the air blowers at 24 hours full blast every day to keep the process going. So I always look for things that is more energy efficient, of course, innovative, but innovation takes time to implement. You cannot bring in something and say, let's do it, let's implement it on a big scale, let's put it into our municipal plan, because everybody will, then we come back to the trust issue again. You know, how can I make sure that this will work? How that it will not bring my plant any downtime? So I will always start with market overview and then source for the correct technologies and partners, and then implementation. I would also call it education. You have to educate the end user on what is the product about. But we always talk about water, you know, water and water. We forgot there is the solid, the waste part, which Wojtek mentioned is like biogas and biomass. So that is the solids part. Solids treatment can also create energy, which can be used, which can be recycled and used back into the whole water treatment plant. So it will create, eventually it might create a closed loop of water, solids, and energy. So, but basically, in summary, when I look for products other than it must be energy saving, it must be able to implement in Singapore context, of course, cost competitiveness.
Okay, thank you for that. We're slowly heading to the end of our panel, but before we open the floor for the questions, I have the last one from my side to all of you, but I guess I'm looking at the time and time-wise, I think I'll give it to panelists. The question would be, what will be the next game changer that can help to achieve water sustainability goals that haven't been commonly used yet, but have a huge future potential in your opinion? And I would be happy to have your thoughts about the topic from two of you, because we have to go to the questions as well, which are interested in the Q&A. Who would like to take this question? Please raise your hand and I'll give it to you. About game changers.
Maybe I'll consequently say 5G technology, NB-IoT, ability to read, collect data in real time and have this data in our systems.
Okay, that's great summary. Anyone else would like to add anything? Katrin, maybe from your point.
Victor?
Wojtek,
Actually, agree.
Victor is willing to say something, I think. So.
Yes, Victor. Victor, yeah. please go ahead.
I think one thing is when we're talking about digitalization, AI, all this stuff, it's good. It's connected. It'll help us. But I think one thing we keep forgetting is cybersecurity. Because with all these connections, it actually opens up a lot of doors for malicious acts to actually happen. So I think cybersecurity was the next big thing. And through my own experience, when I was doing some of my R&D projects, it is not the algorithms and the AI that is causing a lot of problem, because there's a lot of data for you to play with. It's actually how do you protect this data that allows you to get access to the data in the first place. And that, to me, will be a big thing coming up very soon, when especially 5G becomes more widespread. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Victor. And just Katrin, as a last person, you were saying something.
I was just trying to mention about digitalization. I think I just agree with what you guys just talked about. I think digitalization might be the next game changer. I think not only because it's fascinating, but also able to enable us to connect different decentralized plants together, right? That actually probably will enable us to have a more suitable solutions to rural areas in developing countries.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, thank you so much for sharing all the insights or your views on the topic. We would go to the questions from the audience, but before that, I will give floor to Jody to summarize the discussion. Thank you so much from my side.
Yeah, so Magda, you wanted to go through some questions. Maybe you can pick about one or two questions. Yeah, then you can pass it back to me. Yep.
Yeah, let me have a look. We have 3 questions here. Let's go with the first one. What could be the role of data analytics and artificial intelligence in improving the treatment efficiency or operational costs, and what are the challenges industry facing to adopt them? A question from Kieran.
Oh, so maybe I take this one quickly. So I think that the amount of data we'll be collecting is way greater than we can collect right now. So as we talk about this remote reading, about this ability to collect the data on a more systematic basis, I think that the AI data analytics will come in place and be more important when we start to collect more data. So I think the real big data and real big analytics and AI that can really, forecast and see the problems based on the data we have is still ahead of us. What will be the challenge is always like challenge, because the data then have to be transformed to information, and it's still we not get any usage. But then we have to have a usage of this information. So I think that would be the challenge is just to transform the industry itself to make sure that once we have important information, that we can take advantage of that, right? So very generic answer, but I think it's first of all, I think it's just ahead of us, the big data and artificial intelligence that can be really used on the wider scale. And second, there will be another step that we have to make sure that we can draw conclusions and take actions based on information collected.
Thank you, Michal. Does anyone else would like to say anything in this topic?
From the practical point of view, if I can share the thought and the practical view of the data analytics. This is the very short experience after starting up some kind of learning system for the wastewater treatment plant. We are just, as I mentioned, we are just finished the plant which is having this kind of implemented this kind of technology, which is aim is to learn the behaviors of the operator to gather all the data. This role can be significant, although we are in the beginning of the road, I would say, or the path, and there is a lot of improvements as well to be done in order the system will work properly or will work very efficiently. What we are seeing after 3 months of the operation is that there is a lot of improvements we have to do in the system to this kind of, let's say, small data or big data system. Actually gathering all the data within the seconds. So the changing parameters on inlet and outlet will be properly behaving. So there is a lot of tuning needed for this kind of system. And actually for the municipal, it's quite easy because we are aiming to create some kind of pattern because all these municipal wastewater are quite similar. Then the main challenge will be connected with the water inflows or changing pattern of the wastewater inflows according, for instance, to the rainwater. And once these systems will be coming more and more introduced to the market, then treatment efficiency can be maybe not better, but can be more stable. This is the main advantage of this kind of system. More stability and less energy cost. Then because we can just simply use less power for aeration, less power for recirculation, less power for the nitrification, and so on.
Yeah, it's a more sustainable way, right? Basically,
yeah.
The
biggest challenge is the biggest challenge is to have a data which we can put in the box, then it starts learning because creating the framework is just the first step. And this is the biggest challenge for every player, and this is part of the market, I think.
Thank you, Wojtek. And another question is more country specific. It's about Singapore. How do you see water technology evolving in Singapore over the next 10 years, given that energy cost is high? So the topic that we also tackle, and it is dependent on imported energy, but Singapore needs water security, like for example, desalination.
I think if I can share,
Please, Evelyn, go ahead.
That, we cannot change the fact that energy cost. Yeah, we can't change the fact that energy cost is high, but that is energy efficient, so that we can reduce the consumption of electricity. And yeah, we will always be depending on this kind of desalination, recycled water. Yeah, so as I said, we should look towards using renewable energy, how to harvest renewable energy. So I believe that is also one of the directions that we are moving towards on.
Thank you, Evelyn. Thank you. Any more thoughts?
Maybe I just want to add here, I think other than renewable energy, right? Actually, there are a lot of innovations happening here in Singapore in terms of, material advancement. So one of the incubators that I have is actually thinking of using nanofiltration instead of RO, instead of UF to do the pretreatment. So it's a little bit technical, which I wouldn't explain here, but this is just one of the example that what people are doing in terms of lowering the energy cost. And other than this, we also see a lot of efforts has been put in by PUB in terms of our low energy consumption desalination. So people are talking about those electrochemical kind of stuff treatments. So I think it might be also be one of the solutions to address the energy consumption issue here.
Thank you for sharing. Victor, would you like to add something here? This perspective,
yeah,
the strategy of
actually,
Singapore as well.
Yeah, because from Singapore point of view, because earlier we were sharing that Singapore is a very densely, compact city, and then we have centralized systems. We actually PUB is using this. They are bringing forward the idea of circular economy, where waste is not a waste but a misplaced resource, meaning in a sense that whatever waste streams has come out, they can recycle. So there's something called pressure retardant osmosis, even desalination. They're trying to squeeze out even more energy, or basically reduce the energy by looking at the osmotic pressure difference, meaning in a sense that as you take out the water, you make the water even more salty. Actually, there's a lot of osmotic pressure in there, and they can use pressure retardant osmosis to extract even more energy. So, secondly, you also have the Tuas water reclamation plant, where there's this Tuas Nexus, that co-digest food waste to extract more energy. And that's one of the reason is because it's very situated near to one of our incineration plants. And rather than diverting the food waste to incineration plants, last time we just drive further a bit more to go to the food waste facility. And not only that, also in the new water facilities, which is our water reclamation, they are also pushing the frontier where typically these are brackish water, you push to 85% recovery. They're actually, my understanding is that they're also pushing to 93%, meaning we only lose 7% of the water that is treated. So Singapore is taking quite a leap of faith in doing a lot of these things, and whether it can cost effectively, of course, it needs a bit more time. But one good thing is that we don't. I think PUB is doing a good job. It doesn't rest on its laurels and continues to push the boundary to increase the water security. And in fact, potentially we could Singapore could be some case study that helps to give the world a sort of a solution that they can look forward to, especially in urbanization, urban cities. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully also this will be in the collaboration with some companies from Poland. And that the last third question, which I believe is a very good actually closure. The question is, in the area of water technologies, what are the respective strengths of Singapore and Poland when it comes for potential future collaboration as well? What would you say? Maybe we start from Poland. What do you think about Poland in terms of the strength when it comes, the Baltic Seas is quite polluted. We also have different challenges to tackle, and I think that we are pretty advanced when it comes to technology. And what would you say? What is the strength when it comes to the field that we're discussing now? Wojtek? You have to unmute.
Let me comment this issue, please. So actually, the Poland is quite untypical country, untypical European country. We joined European Union 15 years ago, and we've been put in a quite strict framework connected with requirements, also I would say, suggested or demanded by Poland's neighborhoods, including Germany, Sweden, Finland, and all the countries around the Baltic Sea basin, which created some kind of legal, I would say, environment for quite innovative or very efficient treatment solutions. So in Poland, our framework is more stricter than in Germany, it's stricter than in Sweden, it's stricter than in Netherlands, according to the water requirements or effluent requirements, which can be discharged to the rivers. It means that in general, Polish companies have to adapt quickly some kind of innovations or had to create some innovative solutions which are helping to remove so-called BNRs, I mean the bionutrients, or which are creating opportunity to recovery bionutrients at that moment, as we cannot discharge them to the rivers. And then the second factor and opportunities, or let's say the key technologies we are using here are the ammonification, which is spreading quite quickly among the Poland. Also, some kind of precipitation of the phosphorus is becoming a standard in Poland, and some Polish companies are introducing and adapting quickly this kind of solutions. On the other hand, also rising energy cost. This is also connected with the Polish localization and the Polish location and our influence for the fossil fuels on the energy segment, I would say, is creating some really demanding and challenging, really big demand for the innovations, for instance, in sludge treatment, sludge carbonization, and here we are quite strong in the terms of technology. Our problem is that Poland is not connected with the brand. If you think Germany, if you think the Netherlands, a lot of people in the world connected to the leaders in the innovations for water wastewater treatment. And actually, a few of Polish companies are having reference solutions, including Symbiona, which are the leading world innovations in terms of own anaerobic membrane bioreactors, highly energy efficient anaerobic membrane bioreactors with the running references, the ammonification systems with the running references, activated groundwater sludge with the running references, as well as water recovery, which is including the forward osmosis, but here is mostly not as a technology providers, more as a system integrators. This is however, this kind of experiences are quite unusual if you compare it to the other European countries, which are just in 80% doing classical activated sludge still.
Thank you, Wojtek. I see Jody here, so she takes care of the time and reminding us that we are running a little bit late. So not sure, Jody, we don't have time, right, to ask these questions on the Singaporean side.
Yeah, because I know that Catherine has to go for another
Sure.
Magda. Thank you so much, Catherine, for joining us today. I'm not sure if the rest of the speakers you are available just for Magda to ask the last question, or would you like us to just end off at this point? Victor, Evelyn, maybe on the Singapore side? No?
Sorry, you're asking us to contribute or stay on?
Yeah, I was
think
thinking
just a
about,
follow-up
there was a follow-up to strength, the last question from the audience about the
I think
strength
earlier
of
I did
Singapore.
share
You've
a bit
mentioned
that
few
Singapore
fields,
has certain strengths that could be potentially used, and I do know Poland also has strengths. I think there are areas where we could learn from one another and potentially see which solutions, because what works, because I think Singapore is a very tropical country, and the Poland side has a very temperate country, and there is a need to understand the both conditions, especially the bugs, the biological parameters. That one has to have some kind of understanding. What works in Singapore may may not be so conducive in a temperate country, and all these matters has to take into account. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Victor.
Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation. And I still feel there are so many things to talk about here when it comes to the water technologies, but of course we are limited with the time. Jody, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Magdalena, for the lively discussion, and thank you everyone who stayed with us even though we overran on about 17 minutes. But also, once again, to give special mention to all of our panelists, to Victor, to Catherine, who has just left, to Evelyn, to Michal, as well as Wojtek for joining us today. And I hope that it was a very good discussion where there were valuable insights for all of the audience who managed to stay till this late. On behalf of SGInnovate, I'd like to thank everyone for staying with us. And then please keep a lookout to your email for our post-event EDM, which will actually include an event recording of the session for you to share with your network and your friends who may be able to miss joining us live today. And lastly, also just continue to support us at the rest of our events at SGInnovate, and we hope to see you virtually soon again. And please have a lovely morning or afternoon wherever you're tuning from. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.